We're going to skip a little bit now. We're going to skip to Kina Test, the art school on page 226. I just want to spend a little bit of time on this Kina to share two important ideas that I believe are connected. This Kina, there's a lot of things to learn from this Kina. The terrible things that Titus Harasha does inside the Beis Hamikdash, inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The idea of a Kodesh Baruch Hu is being restrained, so to speak. That God is, in some way, has no power over Titus. There is the theme in this Kina of the youth. The Nazis, we know, the Romans wanted to kill children. Something about their purity, about their being their next in line to the tradition bothered them. And we think about the children that we've lost over Jewish history. The young men, the young women, both to tragedy, and many not to tragedy. In our own community, something that we still struggle with. We remember the Fogel family, the boys in Merkas Harav, Gilad Shar, Ayala Yefrach, and Naftali Frankel, the three boys, Kobe Mendels, the Hallel Yafel Ariels, so many others. And the story is told in this Kina. We mentioned a little bit last time, but I'll tell you the story in the Gemara about children. They're going to Rome, and they say, what are we going for? If we drown ourselves, will we get olam haba? The fact that they ask themselves that question is in of itself a fascinating, inspiring piece. Darshul Hanagol Shabahan, so one of the older ones there, Omar, the pasuk says, Hashem Mevashon Hashem Sulos Yam. Hashem will redeem us from the depths of the sea. When the girls heard this, when the girls heard that they could die, jump into the sea, and know that they will be redeemed, they will be saved, and it's Kiddush Hashem, Kavtzu Kulam, the Nafla Tochayam, they jumped into the sea. Nasi Yuladim Kavachor Ba'atzman. So the boys made a Kavachomer, and the boys said, if for the girls it's permitted, for us, for sure, we have to jump into the sea. And they jump into the sea, and the pasuk says, "Kilachnu ragnu kol hayom, nechshavnu kitzon tivcha." Story told. I remember we did it on Shavuos in the Volga River, Ukraine. The Jews were told they wanted to baptize a number of boys and girls. So after fighting with them, the boys and the girls said, "Fine, we'll baptize." And there's a sefer in Yiddish that you can read the story, and they say we'll baptize. They walk down to the sea to be baptized. They go down to the water and they don't come up. Same Gemara, 3,000 years later, same story. And I want to talk about this because usually when we speak about being Moser al Kiddush Hashem, it's usually this idea, dying al Kiddush Hashem from the Crusades, the Beis Hamikdash, times of the Rishonim, stories in battles in Israel. And I want to share a different perspective that I learned this year on Jewish resistance, or a new source of it on Jewish resistance. And before that, I want to talk about something else in this Kina. This Kina, we also talk about Tach V'Tat. Tach V'Tat was, in the 1630s, there was a series of Cossack uprisings in the Ukraine, sparked a wave of unrest throughout Europe. The Cossacks were like these warlike descendants of Russian serfs, renowned for being horsemen, and were recruited earlier to repel invaders from Crimea into the east. In 1648, a leader rose up among them of the Cossacks, Bohdan Khmelnytsky, who unified a gang of serfs, robbers, criminals into this devastating military force, or in layman's terms, suicide squad. And it was terrible people, and whipped into a frenzy of violence and horrific slayings. They went out and they attacked who they thought were their obvious enemy, which was the Jew. The misappropriation of wealth in Ukraine was obviously only to the Jew. Same is true in the 30s in Europe. It's true in the 1600s. In Ukraine, the Jews helped to maintain society, and when society had issues, they took out their anger on the Jews. The Shah who lives from 1621 to 1662, the Shah lives 41 years. The Shah wrote a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. They say that every generation there is somebody who belonged to the previous generation. The Shah was an Achron, but he belongs in the Rishonim. The Shah could fight with Rishonim. He lived 41 years. He lives through Tach V'Tat, and he has a diary about Tach V'Tat. And he says that how people were hurt, how people want to make a day of mourning, and the Tosfos Yontif Lippman Heller lived during this time, and he wanted to know, why did this happen? Right? Why did Tach V'Tat happen? How come 100,000 Jews? You can read. It's called the Yevain Mitzula of Nasan Nata Hanover. It's in English called the Abyss of Despair. It is first-hand accounts, like the Crusades, which was the first time we had first-hand accounts of things. It's a first-hand account of the Tach V'Tat. So he wants to know, why does this happen? Now, today, when a rabbi says, why does something happen, it's usually followed by something idiotic and something foolish and something that's superficial and something that only leads us to get more upset. We did a whole shir on Shavuos about why bad things happen to good people that we don't know. The Tosfos Yontif is not your typical. He is of Yontif Lippman Heller. He is a Gon. He is one of the greats. He's a commentator in the Mishnah. He's not just like espousing ridiculous ideas. He wants to know why this is happening. And he has a she'elas shalom. It's not that he just got up in his basement and said it. He got a vision of what was happening. And he wrote a Mishabeirach about it. And it's about tefillah. He said what was happening was, in the 1630s and 40s, was talking during davening. Okay, this is not him, this happened, mixed dancing, this happened because of something. This is an issue that they were dealing with. And just to show you something about tefillah, Rabbi Soloveitchik talks often about davening. In the 1950s, the University of Cornell established a committee. They wanted to make an interfaith chapel. So Milton Konvitz was the Orthodox Jew on this committee. And the question was, could they have pictures in this chapel for the three religions? So we went to ask Rabbi Soloveitchik. You can read in the book, Communities, Commitment, and some other Covenant, I think. So the Rav says, you obviously can't have pictures there of like Yirmiyahu Hanavi. You can't even daven there. The Rav said that he protested against this chapel in Cornell in the 50s in absolute terms. It's usher to have an interfaith chapel. He says interfaith tefillah is paradoxical. It doesn't make sense. Yes, we have a minyan, but the concept of tefillah, the Rav says, it's that not that the Rav was narrow-minded or he's not tolerant. The nature of davening is that when it comes to social issues, we can work with everybody else. Conservative, Reform, non-Jewish, Christian, Muslim, work with whoever you want on social issues. When it comes to davening and the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, my davening is not the same as your davening. Our tefillah is not a collective expression. Yes, tzarchi tzibor, tefillah b'tzibor, tefillah's hat tzibor, the role of the minyan, of course. The Rav always daven with the minyan. But davening in its core is authentic, it's personal, and it's individualized. It is the most intimate connection that anybody can have. When the Chavetz Chaim wrote, out of all the Svarim, the Mishnah Brura, Chavetz Chaim, Shmiras Halashon, the Chavetz Chaim wrote a small pamphlet that is out of print, but you can buy it someplace it's out of print. The Chavetz Chaim has a small pamphlet for the soldiers going into the Russian army. And one of the things he says, no matter what you can't do, you can't keep Shabbos, can't keep Kashrus, can't wear tzitzis, tefillin, Chanukah, Purim, whatever. Even if you can't daven, talk to God. Davening is the most intimate thing we have in this world. The relationship we have with God is the most intimate relationship in the entire world. More than a spouse, more than a child, you can tell God anything. God's not going to share with anybody else. You can't have mulpil, the Rav said. When the Tosas Yontif is writing about davening, his Mishnah Berach is the following. Mishnah Berach HaMaser Mitzvah V'Yaakov Moshe David Shlomi Yivarech es kol mi sheshomer pivo l'shono shel davar be'esat tefillah. Not during davening. HaKadosh Baruch Hu yishmerei mikol tzara v'tzuko mikol naga machala. You'll get all these. He wrote a tefillah about this. You should say it. He writes Mishnah Berach on Shabbos and for Musaf, and with all the other Mishnah Berachs that we say. Right? Already in those days, they were saying lots of Mishnah Berachs. And the idea is that the Tosas Yontif wasn't saying this. The davening was the issue. I mentioned a few weeks ago, I think, or maybe last week, that I've never really been a fan of sort of campaigns about not talking during davening. Yes, they're good, they're beneficial, but the issue we have is that we have to get better at davening. If we were better at davening, myself included, which is why we ran a tefillah workshop last winter, because I wanted to get better at davening. And, talking during davening is because when I'm davening. It's all tefillah. I'm going to tell you we're going to do announce. Hopefully we're going to work on Elul, is talking when one is finished Shmona Esrei. When one is finished Shmona Esrei and starts talking to somebody else, how do we not understand that somebody else is davening? That's tefillah's hatzibor. We have a job to create the avira of tefillah. And when done properly, our tefillahs together lift us up. There's no better time than a ne'ilah when everybody is pouring out their hearts. So not every davening could be ne'ilah. But it's our identity. Tefillah is how we connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's what is the most meaningful thing we do. Rav Volbe writes that it's not that if I'm good at religion, I'm good at davening. If I'm good at davening, I'll be good at religion. If I really understand tefillah, what it does for me, I'll be good at a lot of other things. And one other idea about identity and about how I connect, which is what the Tosas Yontif said was the issue with Tach V'Tat, which is what we commemorate in this Kina, although we don't mention it by words. It's what's connected with this Kina. Being Moser Nefesh for the identity of what we have. The Kinnos talks about these stories of people who are Moser Nefesh. Usually Moser Nefesh is they jumped off the boat, they jumped off, and they died on Kiddush Hashem. But I want to share a different idea about being Moser for something else. The Romans understood that if you want to subdue a people and you want to get them, then you need to conquer their identity. The Romans realized this, and the Romans understood that's why they wanted to burn the Beis Hamikdash. They wanted to get rid of the leaders of we're going to say about the Asar Harugei Malchus. They were tolerant when they realized that what our connection was. And I learned this year that Titus Harasha, for example, figured that, listen, I'm not worried. Titus Harasha wasn't fighting necessarily against the Jews, but against God. He figures that if he could get God, the Jews would come along. He underestimated what Titus underestimates, which is what this Kina is about. I'll burn the Beis Hamikdash, and I'll have relations on the parochas, and I'll cut it with the sword, and I'll take the menorah back, and I'll put it on the arch, and I'll proclaim to the world that I got him. And eventually, the Jews, they'll come with. How much longer could they go on without their Beis Hamikdash? What he didn't realize was that a Jew has a different identity. The Romans realized that even without a state, without a king, without a parliament, our spiritual identity is hard to conquer. There is a fascinating book, and I want to share, resistance and Moser Nefesh, 180 degrees. There is a book called The Book Smugglers. It was published last year. And the story about the book smugglers focused on a few people, but mostly on Avram Sutzkever. Avram Sutzkever devoted his time in the Vilna ghetto to his work outside the ghetto. Vilna, there was a Jewish neighborhood. Some buildings there still stand, right? The Vilna Shas publishing house was of these buildings. The Vilna ghetto was put into a part of Vilna. Vilna ghetto was not all of Vilna, it was a part of Vilna. And that's where they stuffed every single live Jew, was put into the Vilna ghetto. Some Jews survived during the ghetto, but food was scarce. And the Jews outside the ghetto tried to smuggle food inside the ghetto. There were guards outside, and if you were caught with food inside your pocket, so you were killed. Avram Sutzkever worked at YIVO. YIVO is the Institute for Jewish Research, founded in Vilna in 1925, document Jewish life and language, history, religion, everything. Today, you can find it in New York. His job, Avram Sutzkever's job, was by the Nazis. The Nazis moved their resources to fighting, when we discuss, we'll talk a little more, but in school, when Mrs. Pinchot discusses the Holocaust with the Jews, she always tells them there's the Holocaust, there's also World War II. Okay, the Nazis, besides killing the Jews, were fighting a battle. And they took resources from that battle to Vilna. Why to Vilna? Because Alfred Rosenberg was one of the arch Nazis under Hitler. Rosenberg sounds Jewish, not a Jew. His target wasn't Jewish people, it was Jewish culture. He was one of the architects, what would have been the Jewish Museum. So just like you can go online and learn about the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Romans and the Greeks, Rosenberg was going to say, look, here's the Jew. This is what the Jews did. So as part of that museum, they obviously needed documentation. The Nazis sent to Vilna Sfarim, books, manuscripts, and to a warehouse. They asked a few Jews, 40 Jews, to sort through this warehouse. And most stuff we're going to burn. We don't want to leave any of it over because that's your connection. Nazis were doing book burnings before the war even began. We have book burnings in the 30s because that's how they knew, that's how they would get to our culture. But some of the stuff we're going to save. Included in Vilna is something called the Shtarshon Library. The Shtarshon Library, you can look it up. The Shtarshon Library was a magnificent library. There was an Achron whose name was the Rashash. The Rashash is in the back of most Vilna Shas Gemaras. The Rashash gets to the back of the Gemaras because he was a brilliant Achron. He also had a publishing house. They had what was a wealthy family, the Shtarshons. That's the Rishas. I don't know what the first shin is. I guess Shlomo? Shimon? Sounds like Shimon or Shmuel? Shlomo. It's not Steve. So, and he put his commentary in the back of the Gemara. The Vilna, the Shtarshon library had tens of thousands of books. People would you couldn't take a book out. It was free. It was a library. It was free, but you couldn't take books out. People would line up. Rabbanim, poets, intellectuals, non-Jews, they would line up outside for a chance to go into the library and to read from the Shtarshon library. They took all of these books from the Shtarshon library and dumped it in this warehouse. And they told these Jews, look through the stuff. There is things in this book, Herzog's diary, notes from the Vilna Gaon's Chabura. The Vilna Gaon had a small Chabura that he would learn with. There are notes that they have from the Shtarshon library of the Gaons in Vilna, of his Chabura, like minutes that were taken at these meetings. These guys, Sutzkever, decided, I don't care about bringing back, there was a debate they had. Some of them told him, you're crazy. If you're out of the ghetto, because this warehouse was out of the ghetto, if you're out of the ghetto, get some food or get a gun and bring it back in. And they said no. And they would wrap books. They had all these different methods. They would wrap books underneath their clothes. They couldn't take massive books. They would rip out pages and they would tape it to themselves. They would smuggle this stuff back into the ghetto. And then what they would do is, Sutzkever writes all of these things that happened. For example, if you learn Psachim, there's a commentator of a Rishon called the Rabbeinu David. So the only other copy of the Rabbeinu David, there was one in Leningrad. The only other copy was in Vilna. They found it. And now we have when you learn Psachim today. So I didn't know this. When I learned Psachim, I don't know how many years ago, I got a Rabbeinu David because that's what you ask the older guys in yeshiva. What do I need for this Masech? They tell you need a Rabbeinu David. So I got a Rabbeinu. I had no idea that there was only two Rabbeinu Davids ever until the guys saved one. Okay, so they wrapped it around themselves, and what they would do is they in Vilna in the ghetto underneath were the sewers. They knew that the Nazis eventually would come looking for them, but next to the sewers, they dug tunnels and they made anterooms to keep these. It's like Lahavdil, right? Hamas, when you look at their tunnels, I mean, it's good work. I mean, there's air conditioning, there's electricity, they've got a lot of money because they don't give it to their people. They just use it to build Hamas tunnels. These guys, Lahavdil, used what they could. They made rooms, made tunnels next to the sewers where you couldn't find them. There were these rooms with electricity, so they could keep fans blowing in order that the books wouldn't wilt. And this is what they did. And when asked, why would they do this? They said, I'll read you just a part of this book. It's worth pausing for a moment to ask a basic question. Books by David Fishman. Why? Why do these men who risk their lives for the sake of books and papers? Basically, they were making an existential statement, forming an act of faith. The statement was, literature and culture were ultimate values, greater than the life of any individual group. They were going to die. They chose to connect their remaining lives and if necessary, their deaths with the things that truly mattered. The book smugglers were expressing their faith that there would be a Jewish people after the war, which would need to repossess its cultural treasures. Some would survive and would retrieve these items in order to rebuild Jewish culture. In the darkest hours of Vilna ghetto, it was far from clear that any of this will ever come to pass. And that's what they did. They decided, they ran through the Vilna ghetto, so excited when they would bring a sefer in. And they saved all of these books. And that's why we're here. And that's really what this kina is about. This kina is about being Moser Nefesh. It's about being Moser Nefesh, those that jumped into the sea. Moser Nefesh, those that died al Kiddush Hashem. Moser Nefesh for the things that make us who we are. The Sfarim, the Tfilos, the things that are at our core and they're at our identity. I will say Kina Tezai. We'll go straight to the next Kina, which is Kina Yud Zayin. Tochano Nashim Piryam, most gruesome of the Kinnos. Kalir, throughout this entire Kina, Kalir is not making this stuff up. He's using Chazal, but we don't even have to go to Chazal. All these things that are mentioned in this Kina happened. The third line, Vatiksharna Lesusim Parchim, tied to horses, true stories throughout the Holocaust. You remember the vicious murders in Israel where they dragged the body through the streets. This is real tragedies. The Kina talks as well about children again. If you read through the Kina talks about the it talks about the 9 large measures of the crushed children, which Gemara writes in the Gemara in Gittin. And this Kina is so focused on children. There's something about this idea of the youthfulness, the energy, the future, the brightness of children that I'd like to share a little bit now. When we mourn for children, especially in the Holocaust, 1.5 million children were killed. We also have to mourn for a different kind of child. There are obviously the children who are given to monasteries who did not come back when the Shema Yisrael was being said. We won't talk, we did in the past, but Agarda Mutara, it's a book about the kidnapping of Agarda Mutara, who was a Jew. And then the Jews wanted him back after the war, and he wanted to stay. And there are Jews who stayed as baptized Christians. But there's a different type of child. Not a child who was kidnapped, but a child who was aborted. Gisela Pearl has a book. It's called I Was a Doctor in Auschwitz. She tells of horrific stories of Mengele's brutality. To meet a survivor of Mengele is to hear their stories of what he was and what he did. But her job was that women would come to her and tell her that they're pregnant. A pregnant woman in Auschwitz was as good as dead. They made a movie about her. It's called Out of the Ashes. And about 30 years ago, she was interviewed by the New York Times. She says that she called herself the ambassador of the 6 million. She talks about her past incessantly in private conversations, in the speeches she gave to raise funds. The greatest crime in Auschwitz was to be pregnant, she said. Dr. Mengele told me that it was my duty to report every pregnant woman to him. He said that they would go to another camp for better nutrition, or even for milk. So women began running directly to him, telling him, I'm pregnant. I learned that they were all taken to the research block to be used as guinea pigs. And then the 2 lives would be thrown into the crematorium. I decided that never again would there be a pregnant woman in Auschwitz. She writes that she interrupted these pregnancies in the night on a dirty floor using her hands. No one will ever know what it meant to me to destroy those babies. But if I had done it, both mother and child would have been cruelly murdered. Dr. Mengele had only one palliative, the spoken word. I treated my patients, she says, with beautiful stories, telling them that one day we would have birthdays again, we would sing again. I didn't know when it was Rosh Hashanah, but I have a sense of when the weather turned cool. So I made a party with bread, margarine, and dirty pieces of sausage we received for meals. I said, tonight will be Rosh Hashanah, and tomorrow a better year will come. She was seized by the Gestapo in March of 1944, sent to Auschwitz. She never saw her parents again. But her father, the memory of her father being led away, clutching his sitter, remains a vivid memory for her. It's that sitter, she says, at 16 years old, she graduated first in her class, the only woman and the only Jew. She asked her father if she wanted to go to medical school. He refused. And he says, I don't want my daughter to lose faith, to break away from Judaism. I want you to be a good Jew. So again, a few months later, she comes back. She says, I'll swear. She takes the siddur that he had given her years earlier. She says, I swear on the siddur that I will remain a true good Jew. And her father took that siddur with him into Auschwitz. This is Gisela Pearl. Leah Friedler helped Gisela Pearl. She held the candle so that she could do the work that she needed to do. She went after the war and she asked Rav Sinai Adler, you can meet in Israel, survivor of the war. He is a great posek, and she says to him, did I do the right thing? And he says, absolutely. The halacha says that if a fetus threatens the mother, Dina Karodev, and in these circumstances, the fetus threatened the mother. There's something about children that bothered our enemies. The idea of, of optimism and of hope. Why at Rabbi Akiva's table in Bnei Brak, when they're discussing tragedies and Churban Beis HaMikdash, who is it that reminds Rabbi Akiva to come out of the cave? The Talmidim, the kids. It's Kriya Shema time. It's sunrise. It's Geula. It's redemption. That pureness, the purity, the love of Torah that continues. That's what it is about children. And I'll end with one more story about children. Story is told. I try not to make Tisha B'Av too Holocaust focused, but it's the most recent of our tragedies, and the stories are so raw and so real. The small book called The Unconquerable Spirit tells a story about every Shabbos morning the Jews that were left in Sokol gathered at the Rebbe's home to daven. Shabbos morning, August 15, 1942, the Gestapo raided the Rebbe's house and arrested the worshippers, all 31 of them, including the Rebbe's young son. They were wearing their talesim, put into trucks, driven to the Gestapo headquarters, where they're all shot. After the war, a Ukrainian police officer related what he had seen that day. The Rebbe's young son looked at the Nazi hangman straight in his eyes and said, if you kill us, all the Germans will pay for it. You'll see, the end is near. In answer, the German seized a hatchet and struck the boy with one blow. All the Jews in the town of Linovich were taken to the cemetery together. And at the head of this march was Rav Aryeh Rabin with his white talis. And the youngest of these was a small boy who was only known by his name Ephraim. Ephraim, the son of Chana. Here, old rabbi and young boy, Od Yeshu Kinnos, right? One day, they'll be sitting again on the streets of Yerushalayim. So as they near the cemetery, the rabbi said to his congregation, my dear brethren, after all the hellish pain we have endured in this world, we're about to enter the kingdom of heaven. I can assure you we're going to go directly to paradise. Therefore, don't be afraid. We find from Elchanan Wasserman, as well as many as they would lead their congregations into death, did it with a sense of fulfilling mitzvahs al kiddush Hashem. Our only crime was to be that we're Jews, and this is why we're about to leave this world. Therefore, let us go with a quiet heart. We'll march straight to the place where the rest of the righteous, for whose sake God has permitted the world to endure. Before the Ukrainian guards were able to make a move, a little Ephraim walked up to the rabbi, took hold of the belt of his gartel, and began to cry. Rabbi, he cried, please don't leave me. Let me hold your hand, so it won't be so hard to die. And so the Jews of Linovich, led by their Rebbe and a little boy, entered the cemetery together in one grave. It's something about children that should instill within all of us a sense of a joy of learning and of hope and of emunah and of faith and of optimism, and something that the Nazis wanted to do, the Romans wanted to do. They understood that the youth among us was the most important piece. Not because they were the easiest, the most vulnerable, but because of what they stood for. That's really what this kina is about. Tochal Nashim Pirya. We hear about the Shmonim Elef Kohanim Parachim, the Kohanim who went to the Heichal thinking it wouldn't burn. They're killed as well, but they're targeted because they were the Kohanim. Read here about we mentioned the beginning of Kinnos. Trafna al Damnak Yishmonim Elef Kohanim Nirtzachim. That's what Zechariah and Nebuzaradin. Kinnos 18 and 19 are a little bit of a package. So I'll share a thought about them together, and then we'll do Kino Yud Tes, Kino 19 on page 240. Kino Yud Ches asks a lot of questions. Underlying theme of this Kina is that God has told us that He will take care of us. Zchus Avos, Bris Avos. If so, why are all of these things happening? You said you would be good to us. So why is your name being desecrated? You raised the children and you nurtured them. Why are we dying of thirst? Right? All of these things, you chose us. You eliminate every nation. You chose us. So then why are other people attacking us? If we were chosen and we have a land, then why do we need Iron Dome? And why are we getting attacked again and again? That's Kina Yotes. How can we have been persecuted, beaten, tortured, murdered, chased? And you'll notice, it's important to point out that Rabbi Sachs, in one of his essays, notes, when Jews get angry, we just protest, right? We get angry, Ata Amarta. There's no violence in these Kinnos. There's no one saying, oh my gosh, we're so angry at what's happening, we're going to go out and pillage. And we're not like that. Other nations get angry and are violent. Then you go to Kina Yutes, and that's the answer. The answer is the Cha Hashem Hatzdaka. The Cha Hashem Hatzdaka. Cha Hashem Hatzdaka is the great thing that God has done for us. V'lanu boshes hapanim. So, the great things God has done for us, but why are these terrible sins that we've done, including not rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash? Right? We've done the Egel. We complained in the desert. We ridiculed, we mocked, we sinned with Achan. Hashem Hatzdaka. When we talked on Shavuos about Sadik Viralo, Rosh V'Tovlo, we said, how does it make sense? How does it make sense that bad things happen to good people? We either said that we don't know what's really good or what's really bad, or we don't know who is really good and who is really bad. Or it's Olam Haba versus Olam Hazeh. But the mainstream idea is from the Gemara in Brachos. The Gemara says, if you see a surah that come to you, you fashpesh v'masa, you search and you search, because you're supposed to ask yourself, how do I get better? Ultimately, we believe that everything that happens to us has a reason. And even if I can't find it, I understand that it comes from God. I always thought that Siduk Hadin, especially in my time as a rabbi, Siduk Hadin are things that we say reactively. Right? Something terrible happens, Baruch Dayan Emes. It's, there's whether it's victims of terror, whether it's young men and women in our community, we don't understand it, and we struggle with it, and we grapple with it, and we should ask questions, and we should find people that we feel confident to talk to. But ultimately, it's Baruch Dayan Emes. It's Chah Hashem Hatzdaka. And that's reactive. Something terrible happens, there must be some plan. I don't know it, and I wish I did. And we might believe that Achar Me'av Asher, we get to Shemayim, and we see the picture that makes it make sense. Then I read about God Ezra. I've never seen Tzivuk Hadin in the proactive sense, as I saw from God Ezra. God Ezra was an Israeli soldier killed on April 4th, 2002. He lived in Bat Yam. He was killed in the defensive shield in Jenin refugee camp. He was about to go back to learn in Shiva Or Etzion Hezer Yeshiva. He was known as, at his funeral was said, as a big guy with a big heart, a heart of gold. Just like Ori Ansbacher, they found a song of hers after her death. God Ezra wrote a letter. He was supposed to be finished with his army service soon, and then he was supposed to marry his fiancée, Galit. He wrote a letter to Galit in case something happened. Baruch Dayan Emes, in the future. My dear Galiti, if this letter reaches you, it means something has happened to me. This morning we were informed the mission that was planned for yesterday will, with Almighty's help, take place today. I told you the mission had been changed and was not to be carried out as planned. I didn't want to worry you, my dearest. It was hard for me not to tell you the truth, but I preferred it this way than for you to be crazy with worry. My beloved, on the one hand, I feel that there is nothing more that I want in this world than to be with you, to love you, to establish a home and the family with you. On the other hand, there isn't anything I want more than to be a part of this military operation to strike those terrorists a blow so strong that they will never again consider carrying out a terrorist attack. To do this, there is a price that we must pay. I am willing to be that price. Don't be angry with me, my love, but at moments like this, your feelings feel as if your private life does not exist. Soldiers of David's army would free from their wives for marriage before going into battle. My beloved one, I love you so much, and the only grief of mine is the fact that that you will have sorrow. And I will not be the one who will be privileged to make you happy. You deserve all the happiness in the world, so I ask you, magnificent one, you should be happy. Be happy, love, and blossom, because that's what you deserve. I will always watch over you, and wherever I am, I will see to it that you will meet someone who will make you even happier than I could have made you. My sweet one, don't forget, all that happens is for the best. And if this is what the Almighty chose, then this is what it has to be. What is left for us is to accept with love. I love you. I will always love you. Know that you made me the happiest of men, and you brought me achievements all my life I only dreamt of reaching. I love you, my dearest, and thank you for all the good and the joy you brought me while we were together. Ko man David Rachmana L'Tavavid. He writes this in his letter. Everything God done is for the best. This too. I promise you that where I am now is the most wonderful place that exists. I'm not suffering. I have no regrets. My only sorrow is for the grief of those left behind. You, my family, my friends, spread the message, my dearest one. There is no despair. Always be joyful. Only promise me that you will continue onward and will not allow Sdom to be the victor. You are the victor. That is how you should be, and that is right. I love you forever and for all eternity. I'm always with you, Gadi. That is proactive. It's worth noting that I believe that every soldier, including those in our show right now, that served in the IDF, when they put on that uniform, is an affirmation of that belief that is a mission from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Gadi understood it so much that he proactively understood L'cha Hashem Hatzdaka, not reactive. Not it must be for the best, I guess. But no matter what happens, called the Rachmana L'Tavavid, Ki al Yotes L'cha Hashem Hatzdaka. You find this kina, which is in the article on page 248. This kina is the Asar Rugi Malchus. This begins now. We only have about an hour left, but it begins a shift in our Kinnos from the Beis HaMikdash to other tragedies in Jewish history. The Titus, with the Bar Kokhba revolt, the Romans realized the strength of the Jews comes not from the Beis HaMikdash, but from Torah, from leaders, from Torah leaders. They then began to put into place religious restrictions so that we couldn't have this ability. You can read. I think it's worth reading this kina on your own. There's this version. Obviously, there is the version that we tell on Yom Kippur, which is a little bit of a longer version. The longer version is because it's more tshuva oriented. This is more avelus oriented. But I just want to note one idea before we read this kina. The idea of Kiddush Hashem, especially in the Holocaust, became redefined because generally, I can't give your life for a mitzvah. You should sin, you should eat pork as opposed to dying for eating pork. The question throughout history was more or less, if you're forced to convert to some religion, what should you do? The Holocaust, you were dying because you were a Jew. And nonetheless, while almost across the board, the poskim viewed it as a Kiddush Hashem, those that died during the Holocaust thought of themselves as living the stories of the Asara Haruge Malchus. Esther Farbstein's sefer called Hidden in Thunder. Esther Farbstein is a great Holocaust historian. She is an ultra-Orthodox Haredi who wanted to understand Holocaust. She has a PhD, Holocaust studies. She took her studies with some of the most liberal Holocaust educators and has written some amazing svarim. Her husband is Rosh Yeshiva of the Hebron Yeshiva. He was the Rosh Yeshiva. So she has a number of books. One is called Hidden in Thunder. In Hebrew, it's called B'Seser Ra'am, and it's translated in 2 volumes called Hidden in Thunder. She tells a story here of Shlomo Zolochowski, who died while reciting the Ila Eskara from Yom Kippur, the Asar Haruge Malchus. And she writes, reportedly, the students from the Kalmi Yeshiva went to the death singing, "Fortunate are we," about the opportunity to die as Jews being Jewish. And she continues to tell these stories about how all of the people a lot of the stories about the deaths are reflecting Rabbi Akiva, the Shema Yisraels of Rabbi Akiva. That no matter how they went to their deaths, they did it with a sense of feeling that they were part of the Asara Haruge Malchus. And it's something that we just should be inspired by as we read through this kina, that how they understood the mitzvah about to be given to them, and they went about their deaths in this way. And it's worth. I'll just share one story, and then we'll read this kina, which you should read the English, read the stories. The story is told about a ger chassid who was in one of the camps, whatever rule he had violated. So to the amusement of the Nazis, they decided they were going to kill him by stripping him completely naked and throwing him into a lime pit. Lime acts like acid, and it will burn his flesh. They threw him into the pit, and everyone else looking on helplessly, he cries out, "Ribono Shalom, I'm here, naked before you. You commanded me to take it with sukkahs, to take an esrog. I have no esrog. You said to take esrog is the heart, but I have a heart. You told me to take a lulav. A lulav corresponds to the spine. I have no lulav, but I have a spine. You told me to take the hadassim with the eyes, the aravos with the lips. I don't have hadassim or aravos, but I have eyes and I have lips. Let the cloud rising up from the crematoria be my sukkah. Please, Ribono Shalom, take back my heart, my spine, my eyes, and my lips, so I can fulfill the obligations that I have to you." That's what this kina is. Kina, although these are tragic stories, how Jews have gone to their deaths should be things that inspire us in our lives. How they died should inspire us to live a better life, a more meaningful life. How they would give up anything to have the opportunities that we have, the accessibility to Torah, to Tefillah that we have. The Rav, when he would read this kina, would bawl, he would cry during this kina. You know, Rabbi J.D. Schachter told me once that he feels bad that he doesn't cry when we read this kina. Not that they were frummer in the previous generations, But they were crying. They were crying about how the people went to their deaths, about how the Ori Anspachers are died, how the Ari Folds, those people, the resistance, people who died al Kiddush Hashem should be remembered as we read Kina Chaf Aleph. We'll go directly to Kina Chaf Beis. Sometimes the Kina we do, sometimes we skip. We'll do it this year as the Kinnos now shift to the Crusades and more Jewish communal tragedies. And this Kina specifically highlights those that committed suicide rather than forced conversion to Christianity. The Kina talks about mass suicide, individual suicide, the most horrific of parents killing children, which is something that's documented in the Crusade Chronicles. Parents and family members, friends killing each other, making these pacts of killing each other. But one of the other major themes of this Kina is that the cities, and we'll talk about this when we get to Kina Chaf Hei, cities that were destroyed were major Torah cities. Major Torah cities. And that after the Crusades, when these towns were destroyed, we lost major Rishonim, their Sfarim, their leadership. It's a miracle that our Masorah survived after what we went through during the Crusades. Try learning, today without Rashi and Tosfos. Imagine how much more we lost during the Crusades. We were unable to learn it. This loss of Torah and Torah leadership is something that shared us a thought this morning as we mourned this past year, the loss of the Kalev Rebbe. The Kalev Rebbe survived, was a Hungarian Jew, Nachum Mendel Taub, and was sent to Auschwitz 3 days before Shavuos of 1944, passed away right after Pesach this past year. He came from a town of Kalev, so he was known as the Kalev Rebbe. And if you've seen pictures, you know that the Kalev Rebbe didn't have hair, facial hair, couldn't have children. He had a high-pitched voice because of Mengele's experiments. After being in Cleveland for a little bit, he made Aliyah in 1962 and established Chassidus in Israel. And he was a little bit unique of other Rebbes. He wanted Shema to be said all the time at every major event as a sense of this is what the Jews die on Kiddush Hashem. He was a proponent of the Holocaust Memorial Days as opposed to many other Rebbes. Where did he find his strength? I want to share a piece of Torah from the Kalev Rebbe. The Kalev Rebbe has a number of volumes called the Kol Menachem. You can buy them, you can read them. The Kol Menachem. So in the Kol Menachem, the Parsha Achri Mos, the Rebbe notes the Medrash, Vayikra Rabbah, connects when we say LaDavid Hashem Ori V'Yishi to Acharei Mos Shnei B'nei Aharon, which is a strange connection. So where is the connection? So the Rebbe says, the pasuk says in Achrimos, "Bizos yavo Aaron ala kodesh," and in L'David Hashem we say, "Im takum alay machama bizos ani boteach." The Rebbe says, really, L'David Hashem Ori to the death of Nadav and Avihu. So he writes the following. The Rebbe suggests that after the passing of Nadav and Avihu, it must have felt like a churban. They were two young, budding stars, Nadav and Avihu. They were the next leaders. How could Aaron possibly continue without being complete despair? The answer is Bizos Yavo Aaron ala Kodesh. It's connected Bizos Ani Boteach and Me'es Hashem and Hallel Haisa Zos. We don't know why tragedies happen, but the fact is Hashem is Ori V'Yishi, and that was the Rebbe said. We didn't know why it happened, and it's so much, all this debate about Yom HaShoah. Many didn't want a Yom HaShoah because they wanted to just rebuild, and that's what the Rebbe wanted. After suffering and suffering, he wanted to grow. And the Kalev Rebbe did amazing things. Rigu is Chasidus, taught Torah, establish a new generation. If you look at some of these Rebbes, post the war, the Rav Halbersham, the Baba Rebbe, who was the special of a person, who literally had to restart from nothing. The Kloisenberger Rebbe, who lost his wife and 11 children, who restarted his Chasidus. Survivors in our own community who rebuilt dynasties of families, who looked into tragedy, saw what happened, but says, we're gonna push forward. That's the only way to go, is to look forward. Shira Ish Ran was wounded this past year in Israel, and after she was wounded, she lost her baby. She was pregnant, and she lost the child. She was 30 weeks pregnant at the time. Finally, after hours of surgery, she survived. The baby unfortunately died. Finally, after a few days, she came home from the hospital. Her first remarks to the public was, "I will prove to them, and I will show them. I will bring many more babies into this world. Am Yisrael Chai." With as tragic as these things are, Bezos Yavo Aaron ala Kodesh, Bezos ani Boteach, Hameis Hashem, Haisa Zos. Kinnos Chav Beis. That's all right. The second big stanza, you find the V'chorosh Karcha V'chazakan Gerua. They shaved the beards. This is already, talking about the Crusades, something that we saw again in the Holocaust. This idea of embarrassing the Jew. It's the final verse here as we finish this kina. Torah chigri stak, that we mourn the loss of Torah. You're wrapped in the sackcloth. The kina ends talking about the loss of Torah, the loss of these communities. Usually we do Kina Chav Gimel. We're going to skip Kina Chav Gimel. We are going to go to Kina Chav Hey, but I want to just point out one thing in Kina Chav Dalid. But we'll then move to Chav Hey immediately. But if you turn to Kina Chav Dalid on page 264. We usually skip this Kina. I'm not going to do the Kina inside, but I want to share one very, very important idea. The first line of the Kina. Kina says, also by Lazar HaKalir, Achurban Beis HaMikdash ki huras v'chi hudash. The destruction of the Beis HaMikdash was torn down and trampled upon. So Cheskel Abramsky says that doesn't make sense, that phrase. Cheskel Abramsky was the Dayan 70s. His life's work is the Chazon Yecheskel and the Tosefta. If you learn Tosefta, when you learn the Chazon Yecheskel, which he wrote down on napkins. He didn't have anything. So he notes that, in fact, at his Levaya, they put the 12 volumes of the Chazon Yecheskel on his coffin. I was not buried with it, but as this was his life's work. The line doesn't make sense. It shouldn't say Al Churban Beis Hamikdash Kehuras V'Chudash. It should say Al Beis Hamikdash Kehuras V'Chudash. Right? The destruction of the Beis Hamikdash wasn't trampled. The Beis Hamikdash was trampled. So he points out the following idea. It's a simple idea, and in our age, I think it's an important idea. He says it's not that the Churban is being trampled, it's the memory of the Churban is being trampled. It's becoming ancient history. The idea is that not only of the events of Tisha B'Av being neglected, but the memory of those events are being blurred. We don't appreciate them as much. And we are living today in a world where not Churban Beis Hamikdash is Kuras V'Chudash, but even if you take the Churban Europa, you take the Holocaust, the memory of the Holocaust, it's Kuras V'Chudash. It's being trampled upon. The growth of Holocaust deniers today. How Northwestern had a professor who was an outright Holocaust denier. It wasn't as bad as they thought. They made this stuff up. And of course, you're never going to win an argument with these people. And that's why the work that's being done today, thank Mr. Khan, who never turns down an opportunity to tell his story. You have now a generation of children who are growing up. Their grandparents aren't of the survivors generation. Their grandparents don't have, their grandparents were born after the war. Kihuras v'chudash. And therefore the work, the Holocaust Museum here, the first in the country, to invest a lot of money into holograms. And if you can go today, you can go to the Holocaust Museum and you can watch a hologram, which costs over $1 million per hologram. Survivors had to go. Some of these went out to LA for a few days. They were so careful that when they interviewed them, they had to answer a few thousand questions. Okay, and you go if you haven't seen it. When I worked at the Holocaust Museum this year, they let me you can't play around with it, but it's unbelievable because you have public school kids, Jewish kids, non-Jewish kids. People have no idea what the Holocaust is. To read a book is one thing. To talk to a survivor is different. Many of these people are never going to meet a survivor. You're coming from the middle of Central Illinois. You're a public school trip. You're never going to meet a survivor. And when they brought them out to LA to work with them and to film them, these survivors, they made sure that when they interviewed them, they had to wear the same clothes every day just for the interview part. Because they didn't want somebody saying, "Oh, see that? I noticed a difference. There's no way that person is real." They already were aware of what people would say in reaction to these holograms. And now people they're getting to go see these things. And that's why the work that's done in schools around the country, especially here, Hill Torah, not the yeshiva does it, but Hill Torah with the names, not numbers, with our Lori Hasten and Lori Pinchot, it's preserving for students that are going to get a chance, children who might not ever have met a survivor. Maybe at a speech, they heard a story. They can sit down, they can meet them, and they can tell their grandchildren what they got to do. All right, we saved ourselves now another 75 years, another 100 years. And that's this idea in Iskina. It's not Beis Hamikdash Kuras V'Chudash. It's Churban. It's the memory that is being torn down and is being trampled. Well, let's go to Kina Chavei. We now shift to the Crusades. The Crusades, as we talk about anti-Semitism, the Crusades changed everything. When the Pope in 1095, in November 27th in Clermont, urges that the Christians to take back Jerusalem from the infidels, the Christians decided in 1096, on our way, why wait to Yerushalayim to get the infidels, the Muslims? Mamish, we have a chance for a mitzvah, d'oraisa, right here in our own backyard. There are these people, Jews, and they're completely caught off guard. The Jews, in Worms and in Germisia and in Spire, and this kina actually we have the dates. Look at this kina. We mentioned many times when everybody jumps up in shul, the Shabbos after Pesach, no avarachamim, yelling and screaming, that we say avarachamim because this is when the Crusades happened. The Crusades happened between Pesach and between Shavuos, which is why we say avarachamim was written for this period of time. It was written for Pesach to Shavuos. In Frankfurt, they only said avarachamim twice a year. Shabbos Chazon and Shabbos right after Pesach. And you have here, the dates of the Crusades. Bachodesh Hashlishi, Bashlishi, that's the 3rd of Sivan. But the Crusades, we're running out of time, so we won't do some history on the Crusades, but how it really changed. It changed history. Now it's okay to beat up the Jew. But I want to share an idea on Torah specifically. If you look at the third stanza. The third stanza, towards the end of the third stanza, starts with Seirad Eini Dima. At the end of that stanza, the Kinnos says, "A Torah v'Talmud v'Halomda." Where is the Torah, the scripture, the learning, those that learn it? Where is the Gemara? Halo hamakom me'ein yoshev charev. The place, it's in ruins. No one's there. We're not just mourning the loss of Torah. When we mourn for the loss of Torah, we know that the Gemara tells us in the Nedarim, the sin that brought down the Beis Hamikdash was she'mevarchim Torah tchila. They didn't make berachas HaTorah. Okay, the Gemara says really like that. That's it. So mevarchim Torah b'tchila. Why is that so bad? It's so bad because Torah obviously has a purpose to educate us, to let us learn it. You should know what to do. But Torah that is either being learned just intellectually without a sense of connection and Mesorah and of who I am and what it means to me, has no value at all. When we talk about Crusades and a Torah v'Halomda, talking not just about our learning, but our connection to Mesorah and how that takes us all the way back to Har Sinai. I'm going to share with you something from the Rav that every time that I share it, I did, and it gives me chills. The Rav says that to me, it's an experience, Torah. The secret of Mispar Hadoros, which is what we're talking about here, merging many generations into one community, where discrepancy of age disappears, where years play no role, centuries have no significance, where generations, I can say, to commune with each other, that happens every time I enter the classroom at the yeshiva. The Rav says, right, go to any shir today. It could be a Parsha shir, it could be a Navi shir, a Gemara shir, a Daf Yomi shir. It doesn't make a difference. There's 95-year-old men, 95-year-old women, and then there's 18-year-old men and women. It doesn't make a difference. Everybody combines together. The Rav said, when I enter the classroom, it's crowded with boys who could be, as far as age is concerned, my grandchildren. I enter and I'm an old man, wrinkled face, eyes reflecting fatigue, sadness of old age. It's the melancholy of remembering things which disappear, which don't exist. But when I sit down, and opposite from me are rows of boys with beaming eyes, right there are the children again. Beaming faces, clear eyes, radiating the joys of being young. When I enter, I'm in a very pessimistic mood, the Rav said. I enter into despair. I ask myself, every time I enter the classroom, can there be a dialogue between me, the old man, and the young students, between the Rebbe in his Indian summer, the boys in the spring of their lives? I start the shir, I don't know what the conclusion will be. Whenever I start the shir, the door opens, an old man walks in and sits down. He is older than I. They call him the Rav. He's older than the Rav. He's Reb Chaim Brisker. And he continues, the Rav, how the Rambam would sit down with him, the Ritva would sit down with him. Right? The Rav said he was never lonely in his life because he always had the Rishonim. And what? That's this Kina. A Torah v'halomda is not just, can I open up? The sense when you open a Gemara, right? When you open a Gemara, what I try instilling within my students, when you open Gemara, you're part of the process. Right? We never say that Amar Rava said. It's never Rava said. Rava says. He's there. You listen. And so the Rav opens again quietly, and another old man comes in. He's older than Reb Chaim. He lived in the 17th century. His name is the Shach. And then more show up. Some lived in the 11th century, 12th century. Some lived in antiquity. Rabbi Akiva, Rashi, Rabbeinu Tam, the Raiva, the Rashba. More come in. The Rambam says something. The Raiva disagrees. Sometimes he's very nasty. Generations, young boys, 22, 23, 24 years old. These boys who were just 18 years old in my class. One generation, my generation. Chaim Brisker, the Shach, the Rashba, the Rambam, the Rashi, Rabbeinu Tam. There's no end. Rav Haigo, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Elchanan ben Zakkai, and we all speak one language. Kol Aretz Safa Achas from Parshas Noach with the Migdal Bavel. One language. We chat, we laugh, we pursue one goal. It's a common vision. There's a Misora conjugality, friendship, chevrashaft. That's Misora. And the Rav says we belong to the same Misora community where generations meet, where hands, no matter how wrinkled and parchment dry one hand is, and how soft and the other hand is, they shake, they unite in a community where the great dialogue continues. When I was looking at the baby who was redeemed this evening, as I said at a Pidyon Haben, I don't know whether he'll be in my class, whether I'll live to have him, but someone will sit and teach the baby. He's already a member of the community of the Great Masorah, and I feel as if it's possible to establish a communication with this baby. That's this sense of loss that we had with the Crusades. Losing centers of Torah study in Worms, in Spire, in Mainz, in Germany. These are Torah-centered towns. We lost the works of Rishonim. But Masorah didn't die. It was kept along by Balei Tosfos, by the Rishonim, by Rashi, by Rabbeinu Tam, who's hurt in the Crusades. Rabbeinu Tam suffers a head injury during the Second Crusades. He's injured the rest of his life. He suffers from a headache. But this sense that every time that we get a chance to learn Torah, we are affirming that no matter how much they beat us up and they knock us down, our identity are the book smugglers. We're the book smugglers. We open that Gemara, the accessibility to Torah, we open that YU Torah app, whatever it is. We get a chance to learn Torah, we're connecting back to that Masorah, and we have an answer now. A Torah v'olamo, we can say that we're there, we're filling that gap. Kina chafei mitain rosh Hashanah. You can see the names of these cities, Va'aldire Kahal Magensia Hadura, the names of the city, the dates that they were attacked. We're going to go to Kina Chavav, the next Kina, which is a Kina about Yirmiyahu Navi, who sent to the Avos, to Moshe, who all left the world, to ask for their help, for their participation in mourning, to daven to God for a better future. So Avram gets up, and Avram says, God, I sacrificed Yitzchak. Right? He was told to sacrifice his son. He didn't pay any attention to those feelings of a merciful father. He did it. Hashem, please reciprocate. And there's no answer. Yitzchak says, God, I was willing to kill myself. Kiddush Hashem, there's no answer. Yaakov says, I worked in Lavan's house 20 years. Esau tried to kill me. I was going to die to save my children. Hashem, remember, save us. Nothing. Moshe, 40 years. I couldn't even go into Israel. No answer. Finally, Rachel, as the Medrash tells us, appears in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, reiterates to him how difficult it was for her to have participated in when Leah was getting switched, gave her the signs. The Medrash even fills in more details about how difficult this was. Tells Al Baneha, you see without Rachel, is Rachel's tremendous sensitivity for her sister. While we often talk about Rabbi Akiva in his death, there is a wild story about the daughter of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was called by Chachamim, the Rosh HaChachamim. He's where we know his wife's name, and we also have a story about his daughter. We don't know her name, but the Gemara in Shabbos tells a wild story. Rabbi Akiva is living right around the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. So we know Kamsa Bar Kamsa, they weren't nice. One guy doesn't get invited. Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. 150 years later, we get this story. The stargazers told Rabbi Akiva that the day of her wedding, his daughter will be bit by a snake and die. It's the Gemara in Shabbos. The day of her wedding, she takes out some jewelry with a pin, and she puts the pin in the wall, the Gemara says, and it happened to be that she punctured the eye of a snake. The next morning, she takes the jewelry out of the wall, and she sees, lo and behold, dead snake. She tells Rabbi Akiva, she says, but look what happens. Akiva says, what did you do to deserve this? Akiva says, there was an opinion you were supposed to die, and now you're alive. What happened? So she said, I don't know. Last night at the wedding, everybody was coming in, everybody was eating, and then a poor person came in, the Gemara says. Nobody was helping him. So shokalti lirisatani, dayavtili. So I helped him. The bride sees that the only person to help out this poor person is her. So she gives him the meal. And she took her meal and gave it to the poor person. Akiva says, in the Amar la mitzvah vadata, you did a mitzvah, and tzedakah tatzali maves. It's an unbelievable idea. One way to understand this story was that she learned a lesson that 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva failed to learn. Right? It's not ironic that 24,000 students die because Onohagu Kavod Zelozeh, which wasn't, hey, I hate you. It was a sense of not appreciating, not being sensitive, compassionate, respectful to one another. And here it is, and she sees this man. He needs some dinner. Goes and tells her, what to us would be a meaningless chesed. Anybody probably would have done it, but nobody was doing it, and she does it. And I think it's important as we think about this kina and about sinas chinam, which we don't really talk about that much this morning. But when we think about davening, which I mentioned a lot earlier, the Gemara tells us, first the Gemara, sometimes people ask me, they say, I want to daven for somebody, I don't know the name. I know the name, I want to daven, I don't know the person's name. So the answer is, it's okay. You know the person's English name? It's okay. You just know who they are, you can think that too. The Gemara says that you don't need to know the name. Rav Kook, in his introduction to the Siddur, Rav Kook writes, why do I need to know the person's name? When I'm praying for myself, illness, poverty, war, whatever I'm praying for, God gave me those things to evoke me to daven. So out of my davening, I should earn a resolution to these issues. If I'm praying for you, I don't know why you have those things. I'm just praying because I care. So even we're davening, we might not know the name of a sick person. Maybe we don't even know a sick person. There are things that we can daven for. We can daven people that are sick, obvious. Sick, we should daven for cures for things that don't yet have a cure. Things that we can heal today that we couldn't heal 10 years ago. We should daven for people that don't have enough money. It shouldn't only be in Rifa'enu that I mention people in my Shemona Esrei. Barei Cholenu is about sustenance. Do I know someone in my community that is suffering? And if I don't, I know that there are people that I don't know, but that are suffering. I should daven that there should be less of an income gap in the world today. That the suicide rate should fall within our own community, within the world. Pray for that they should get help. There should be a resolution. Pray for those that are lonely, that are depressed, that need help, that don't have a support system. That's what Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, sensitivity, Racham Avakal, Baneha, Rabbi Akiva's daughter. It's just about reaching out to people, and not only my own circle, but everybody else. For those that I don't know, for those that I do know, for those that are unemployed, Barei Cholenu, for those that are having a hard time, Go'al Yisrael, for those that that are attacking us, V'lam al Shinim. There's so many things that we could daven for that should be part of our davening, as we daven for ourselves and as we daven for others as well. Kina Chavav, Oz B'halach Yemiyah. I'm going to go to Kino Lamed Aleph. We'll share a thought, and then we'll stand up and sing it together. We'll wrap up, hopefully, in the next half hour with a few more Kinos, the Kino for the Shoah, and then Kilit Zion. But we'll do Kino Lamed Aleph. It's Eishtu Kirmi, the great of the Jewish people. It's either great or really bad. A lot of themes to this Kina, the theme of how quickly things could change. Keheref Ayin, the redemption could come as quick as possible, same way that tragedy could come, that hope could come. This Kina intensifies our grief. And there, in this connection, in this Kina, we have obviously the connection between Tisha B'Av and Pesach. We mentioned in the past about the last Kina as well, but we mentioned in the past that the idea of Pesach is Pesach, the mouth that talks, which is what we did wrong on Tisha B'Av, but we should do better on Pesach. But the idea of Pesach and Tisha B'Av is that both we relive both, right? Both we tell stories. Both we have to relive it like we were there. And this Kina, it's like a moment from this past year was the return of the body of Zachariah Balmo. It's obviously a wonderful thing to bring the body back and to have a burial in a proper kfura, and at the same time mourning a fallen soldier. After 37 years in a covert operation, which was translated Mivtzaer Zemer Noga as Operation Bittersweet Song. That was the name the army gave to this operation, which comes from a poem by a woman in the 20th century who was known as Rachel HaMishoreret. She has a song called Zomer Noga, Bittersweet Song. And after 37 years, they had a little bit of hope. The Medrash in Eicha Rabbah talks about the connection between Pesach and between Tisha B'Av. which always fall out, not just, they fall out obviously on the same day of the week, but the Medrash has something deeper. The Medrash suggests, al derech drush, that the Beis Halevi, says, based on this Medrash, that we say in the Medrash, has to be ani ba'mrorim. We're satisfied with maror. So maror does not require one to be fully satisfied. You can eat a kazayis and maror on Pesach, and you're fulfilling your mitzvah. But the Karban Pesach is different, right? You eat a nochal sova, you're full, you're satiated. So this symbolizes the fact that our experience on even Pesach is difficult because it's bittersweet. There were times of freedom, but ultimately we go to sleep with Pesach in our mouths, with afikomen in our mouths. But there's also a little bit of maror. There's throughout Jewish history, there's a little bit of B'tzesim Mitzrayim and B'tzesim Yerushalayim. And that's even on the night of freedom, of Pesach night, we recall Tisha B'Av. We recall that, and we hope that there will be the return of Zachary Baumel, that he could have a proper kfura, but that we lost somebody, that we have happy moments and we have sad moments, and that hopefully as we end this kina, it's only the happy moments that we'll have moving forward. We'll stand up, we'll cite this kina together, and then we'll have a few more before we end. Eshtu kakir v'halo siyali v'bitzeisi mitzrayim Ekinim ayira l'man azira b'tzeisi mirushalayim Az yashir Moshe shir lo yinashe b'tzeisi mitzrayim Ayikonen Yirmiyav v'namnam b'tzeisi mirushalayim Beisi Yiskanon v'shachana'anon b'tzeisi mitzrayim Hamas el shachno alay kanon b'tzeisi mirushalayim Galaya ramu v'kal chamakamu b'tzeisi mitzrayim Zeidonim shatafu v'rosh yitzafu b'tzeisi mirushalayim Digad shamayim mitzrayim b'tzeisi mitzrayim Ana umrorim mayim hamarim b'tzeisi mirushalayim Hashkei v'harev s'vivos hachor b'tzeisi mitzrayim Kore elevel al naros vavel b'tzeisi mirushalayim Umarekor Adonai Keishal Chelas Lefanai B'tzeisi mitzrayim Hereb L'tusha L'tevach Nitzusha B'tzeisi mirusha Zevach U'mincha V'shemen HaMishcha B'tzeisi mitzrayim Zigulas Elekucha Katzon Natimcha B'tzeisi mirushalayim Dagim v'shabach ha'gazva b'sim v'yosos b'tzeisi mitzrayim Tanis v'evel ridof ha'hevel b'tzeisi Tovim ha'ohalim na'arba adigalim b'tzeisi mitzrayim Ishme'elim machanot na'reilim b'tzeisi Yovel Shmita v'eresh ha'keita b'tzeisi mitzrayim Ochor l'tzmisos v'karos l'chrisos b'tzeisi Kapares v'aron v'avnei zikaron b'tzeisi mitzrayim V'avnei yakela uchlei avela b'tzeisi mirushalayim Leviam v'aharonim v'shivim zikenim b'tzeisi mitzrayim Uksim u'monim l'mochrim v'konim b'tzeisi Moshe yireyu v'aharon yamcheinu b'tzeisi mitzrayim Nebuchadnezzar v'adronus keitzar b'tzeisi Layim naro chama v'adai neshama b'tzeisi mitzrayim Agag mimenu inenu b'tzeisi mirushalayim Sisrei paroches v'sidrei ma'areches b'tzeisi mitzrayim Heimani teches alai sacheches b'tzeisi mirushalayim
Olim Azvachos V'Ishay Nechochim B'Tzeisi Mitzrayim Cherem Yikarim Netzion Yikarim B'Tzeisi Yerushalayim Ha'arei Nikba'os L'Chalon Nikba'os B'Tzeisi Mitzrayim Because it's true, the Kolion is well, the Tracy Yerushalayim. Tzitzaza b'ham shel v'raha b'tzeisi mitzrayim Ushlag hanezer yafas ovezer b'tzeisi mirushalayim Kedusha u'nevuah u'chol Adonai nira b'tzeisi mitzrayim Nikola mara v'ruach ma b'tzeisi mirushalayim Rina v'Yeshua, chatzot tzatshua, b'tzeisi mitzrayim, zakas halom, v'nakas halom. Ayim shulchanu menorah, v'chali luktorah, b'tzeisi mitzrayim, eilel v'soeva, ufetel matzeva, b'tzeisi mirushalayim. Torah Suda Klei Achevda B'Tzeisi Mitzrayim Sasan Uslim Chavnas Yagam Yanacha B'Shuvi.
I'll skip ahead to Kina Lamed Vav. Kina, I briefly mentioned the idea of the Kina in the drasha yesterday. It's Tzion Halatishali. This kina is changes our tone and the tenor of the rest of the kinos. It's written by Rehuda Halevi, the author of the Kuzari, who was born in Spain in 1080, who's a great poet, was called the Rosh HaMishorim by the Rashba. Writes he was the greatest of all poets. Yom Shabbason is Rehuda Halevi, lived in Spain, had a comfortable life, was minister of finance, and then made his way to Israel, where legend has it is killed upon bending down to kiss the ground, is killed by an Arab swordsman. The Vilna Gaon said that he studied two works over and over again, the Chovas Halavavos and the Kuzari. The job in the end of Kinnos is to appreciate what we've lost, almost a little bit like a Maschil Biganos V'Sayim Shevach idea in that the Seder. We have the sad stuff to remind us of how good it was, and as well to be inspired about where Zion is right now. The Rav said that to appreciate the catastrophe, you can't just do it Zion b'chorbana, but Zion b'vinyana. What it's like, what it was like, the hustle, the bustle, the how Yerushalayim looked, which thank God is being rebuilt today. The role of Yerushalayim, and especially Israel, especially Yerushalayim, is something that is the theme of these parts of these keynotes, and something that obviously is always in our hearts. Prior to the Camp David Accords in 1978, Carter submitted a letter to Begin that calls the Israeli leader to cause Begin to turn pale, and he promptly returned to the Carter unsigned. So Carter says to Begin, I didn't ask you to give up Yerushalayim. I only asked that you put it on the negotiating table. So Begin responded in classic Begin, poetic, Ben Jews were reciting a verse from David HaMelech, does Judaism not state that you must give up a limb in order to save the entire body, said Carter. Yes, countered Begin, but not if the limb is one's heart of the Jewish people. Tzion b'vin, not just b'chorbana, but tzion b'vinyana. And I'll share a dialogue in the Zohar. The Zohar has a debate, which is reflected a little bit in the Kinnos last night, actually, but a debate between those in Bavel and those in Israel. And the debate is, who could cry? Who's better at mourning? Those in Bavel or those outside? So Sholchu b'nei Bavel l'bnei Ara, they sent to those in Israel, you're not allowed to cry. We're allowed to cry. Look at us. We're in exile. We're in Bavel. You can't cry. You're there, but we're all the outside here. Sholach lo b'nei Ara kadisha. They sent back to the those in Bavel. We know where you are, but we're the ones who should cry. Because it's like living with the king, but the king is no longer there. We were part of the family. We live in the home where God used to be. And now God is no longer there. You cry for a lost God, we're crying for a lost parent. Right? You're crying because you can't see the Kotel. We're crying because we see it, and the Beis Hamikdash has been destroyed. And it's becoming, this idea that we hope that with the crying, it will be rebuilt. The idea that we shouldn't cry anymore. The idea, Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami, Omar Alokechem, Dabru al Leiv Yerushalayim. Rav Kook used to say that when he would talk about the Kotel, he would say, there are some hearts that are of stone, there are some stones that are truly hearts. And that's what the Kotel represented, a stone who's truly a heart. And that's the job at the end of these Kinnos. The job at the end is to think about it's getting to Chatzos. 25 minutes is Chatzos. The Ramah writes at the end of towards Chatzos, you have to get up, you have to do a little bit Nechama. So the Tzion Halatishali Kinnos give us a little bit of Nechama. You see what we have today, the resource that we do have today, the fact that we have a democracy, the fact that we have a state of Israel, the fact that we've rebuilt Torah, and we've rebuilt all of these things. And as sad as it is that we haven't gotten to the point of third Beis Hamikdash status yet, but to take Nechama and what we have, after Mincha tonight, I'll share a little bit about what it means to have Nechama, but to take some Nechama, some perspective, and to understand that we are rebuilding as we speak, and that's Tzion Halatishali. Dukina Lamed Vav. We're going to skip ahead, and we're going to do as we wrap up in the next 5-10 minutes. We'll do the Kina for the Shoah. In other years, we've done the Kina from Rav Schwab. This year, we'll do the Kina that is found on this art scroll on page 384, found on the OU Kinnos on page 627. Kina from Rav Halbustram, Zechatzal Levracha, the Baba Rebbe. Before we begin, just while we spent parts of this morning discussing the Holocaust, just to share just one more idea. I like to share every year because I think it's an important idea from Avaran Lichtenstein, the great Rashi of the Gush, who says that there are 4 lessons we should take when we think about the Shoah. Number 1 is that we have a job to remember, and remembrance is twofold. Just like Zeichel HaMikdash. There's Zeichel HaMikdash, things that I do to remind them of me of how sad I am. Ashes at a wedding, part of your home. Zeichel HaMikdash, and Zeichel HaMikdash of how great it was. Hoshanos every day of Sukkot. That's part of, remember the vibrant life that existed pre the war, and those stories, those cities, those communities. Rav Aaron says the second is to strive for a higher level of love between other fellow Jews. Not only is that a theme of Kamsa Bar Kamsa, we mentioned in the past, Kinnos. If you read the Holocaust diaries, including if you read Hillel Seidman's diaries, it didn't make a difference what kind of Jew you were. From, not from, Reform, conservative, didn't make a difference. Black Hat, Streimel, Strugi, you were a Jew as a Jew. And he writes that they walked out. He says he's never seen Jews so unified before, marching towards their deaths. We should, in our own lives, strive for better love in fellow Jews. He says the third lesson is to learn from suffering to truly appreciate how fortunate we are. To be humble about what we've been given, and to use what we've been given to impact people around us, impact the world. And finally, to be accompanied by a greater sense of mission. There are 6, it made such an imprint on me as a child. When I was a kid, in the last Hakafa on Simchas Torah, my rabbi, who now still does OU Tishba of Kinnos, Rabbi Weinreb, would make the shul get in a big circle. And everybody would get in a big circle, like we do here when we sing slow songs. We would sing slow songs. But he would say every year, imagine if there was never a tragedy in Jewish history. Imagine if there was never a pogrom, an Inquisition, or a Holocaust. We couldn't even fill the streets with that many Jews. And every Jew that has left this world, those that have passed away this year, those that were young and the old, the famous and the faceless, it's our job to finish that mission. To learn Torah that they can't learn, to impact chesed that they couldn't do. On the idea of a mission, Esther Farbstein quotes the following in her book on the Holocaust from a young man. It was ER 1945, April 26, 1945, the day before Pesach Sheni. It was announced that an American Army chaplain would be arriving at the SS movie theater. They had a movie theater. Was set up for the rabbi's appearance. It was Rabbi Herschel Schachter, J.J. Schachter's father. He said that Kemal Rachim and Harla Kadosh, who had been there. This was the first time I realized that they included my father, my mother, and my brother, and perhaps my 2 sisters, whose fate I did not yet know. Even before hearing this, the rabbi said Kemal Rachim. I knew my relatives were not alive. I knew what had happened to them, and I had no doubt about it. When I heard the prayer, the knowledge that they were really gone took on a different character. It became absolute. From then on, he said, I had to recite a prayer for them. When I recovered, I noticed the 2 lines were forming. At the front of the line, where the rabbi was handing out a matzah, it's Pesach Sheni, we discussed this a while ago. On the other hand, they were getting a prayer book. I got a prayer book, and I knew that I was resuming being a Jew. Suddenly, I remembered Shema and the other tefillos. Again, I could say them by heart. How was it? For the 11 months, I hadn't been able to remember and voice the simple Shema prayer that every little 2 or 3-year-old boy, or girl, child knows by heart. And suddenly I remembered all the prayers and I could pray. Then I discovered that I was a believer. That divine providence is guiding the world. That what had happened was perpetrated by that providence itself. That we must not question nor complain. I felt that my faith was returning, that I was again becoming a believing Jew. I undertook to keep this faith and return to me all my life, to live by that faith and die by that faith. From that day on, I prayed every day. At first, I used a siddur given by the U.S. Army, in which the prayers were abridged, prayer book and tefillin, and I resumed praying the way a Jew prays. That was the complete restoration of faith and a milestone. Although I did not yet know how the feeling would be translated into a different way of life. And that's, I think, a mission that we should feel as we end the Kinnos. These stories, the survivors, those that didn't survive, leave us with a sense of a mission. Of if they could restore their faith and they could say, I'm going to move on, I'm going to build, I'm going to grow. How much more so should we feel the sense of responsibility and opportunity on our shoulders? We'll say this short Kina. We'll share one more story and then we'll end with Keli Tzion. Kina from the Baba Rebbe, page 384. People asked me over Shabbos if I was going to talk about the foxes. Everybody saw the video with the foxes at the kotel. So I said I didn't want to be that rabbi, right? But I will be that rabbi when it comes to the picture with the woman at the kotel with her descendants. If you haven't seen the picture, the video of Shoshana Ovitz, an Auschwitz survivor who's about to turn 104. She wanted all of her children and grandchildren to be there at the kotel together with her. So while the foxes run out, and that's terrible, and it's sad, and that was one vision, right? The Gemara tells us there's the other vision of the Yeshus Kinnos was standing in Rehovos Yerushalayim. Sivan Rachav Meir, one of the great journalists and teachers of Torah today in Israel. So she says, in front of her eyes, Mengele took her mother, and after the war, she met Grandpa Dov, who lost his wife and children in the camps. She got married, went to Haifa. She was a seamstress and helped him run the store. She's now 104. She asked for a gift, all of her offspring to be there. I don't know how many were there, but there were a lot. And not only were they there, but standing there at the kotel, rebuilt. Today, if you get a chance, it might be over at this point, but if to watch the NCSY Kolo Kumsitz, to see hundreds of people joining in, singing a nation, the story of Napoleon, who's walking through, and he goes to the shul and he says, "What's happening?" I say, "We're mourning for what? The Beis Hamikdash. Oh, when did it fall? 2,000 years ago." So a nation like that, Napoleon says, you'll be around for a long time. The idea that not only rebuilt in front of the kotel with the kotel, that's ours. Yerushalayim, that's ours. With descendants, with Torah learning being rebuilt, it should give us nechama. That picture should give us nechama. So all we've been through and all the chasing around, we're hoping to get to a point where we're able to say Shuv Yerushalayim completely, where everything is being rebuilt. We wait for that dawn and that geula, that we've appreciated what we've mourned, so that we're able to appreciate where we're going. We'll stand up. We'll recite the final Kinnos this morning of Keilit Zion.
Pages are? Keilit Zion v'yareha, k'mo isha v'tzireha, v'chipsu lach hagurasa, kal ba'al yoreha. I have another one. Ternetash v'yashmatzo nadoreha, v'yal v'yas mecharfeyel, v'so mikdash nadareha, Keilit Zion v'yareha. Moisha v'tzirah, chivsulach hagurasa, kalbal nureha, alei galos misharisayel, ani meishir zimareha, v'al dama masher shubach, kemo meimei ye'areha, Keilit Zion v'yareha, kemo isha v'tzirah, Chivsulach hagurasa kalbal niureha aleag yom echoleha sher doma v'oreha v'alvad asher shomim bitol sanhedria Keilit Zion v'yareha k'mo isha v'tzireha B'chivsulach hagurasa kabal niureha alei zivchei simideha b'yonei mechareha v'al chilol k'meichal u'mizbach k'toreha Keilit Zion v'yareha k'mo isha v'tzireha b'chivsulach hagurasa Al ba'al nureha, alei tapei milateha, b'nei David givireha, v'al yafyam asher chasham, v'eis saruch hasareha, Keilit Zion v'yareha, כמו אישה בציריה, חפשו לך הגורסק, על בעל נעוריה, עלי כבוד אשר גדלה, עץ חורבן דביריה, יעלו חץ אשר לחץ, ושם צקים חגוריה, אלי ציון ביריה, כמו אישה בציריה, חפשו לך הגורסק, על בעל נזיריה, ביעל ניפוץ עלי סלה, עולה לה בנעריה, אלי ציון ביריה, כמו אישה בציריה, חפשו לך הגורסק, על בעל נעוריה, עלי שמחה זויביה, צחקו על שבריה, ויעלינוי בני חורין, נדיביה טהריה, אלי ציון ביריה, כמו אישה בציריה, חפשו לך הגורסק, על בעל נעוריה, אלי פשע אשר יסוד, צלול דרך אשוריה, יעל ציבוס כהוליה, שזופיה שחוריה, אלי ציון ביריה, כמו אישה בציריה, וחפשו לך הגורסק, על בעל נעוריה, עלי קולות מחרפיה, עץ רבו פיגוריה, ביעל רגשס מגדפיה, בסוף משכן חצריה, עלי ציון ביריה, כמו אישה בציריה, וחפשו לך הגורסק, על בעל נעוריה, עלי שמחה אשר חולם, פי קמי מציריה, ביעל תחן יצא בחולה, כשוב ושמע אמריה, אלי ציון ביריה, כמו אישה בציריה, חפשו לך על בעל נעוריה.